The storm arrived without warning that night, the kind that makes even the bravest heart whisper prayers. Inside the private ward of Lagos General Hospital, machines beeped in frantic rhythm around a single bed where a woman lay gasping for breath. Her name was Ados, and her skin had taken on the pallor of ash. Nurses rushed in and out, their faces tight with concern. But in the corner of that cold white room stood her husband Chukwuemeka, phone in hand, his expression as still as stone. "Sir, your wife is coding," a nurse called out, her voice breaking with urgency. Amika, as everyone called him, did not move. His thumb scrolled across his phone screen, his eyes reflecting not the dying woman before him, but numbers, calculations, futures being rewritten in his favor. The heart monitor screamed one long, unbroken note, and then silence. They say love and money cannot coexist in the same heart. Emeka proved this with blood. 6 months earlier, the world knew them as perfection, wrapped in designer clothes and camera flashes. Chukwuemeka and Adaeze Okafor graced magazine covers, their smiles bright enough to sell dreams. He was the self-made billionaire, the tech mogul who built empires from nothing. She was the beauty with brains, the village girl who became a city queen, the woman who proved that marrying for love still existed in a world drunk on greed. But perfection, like all beautiful lies, only looks real from a distance. Inside the glass-walled mansion, on Banana Island, where marble floors stretched like frozen lakes and chandeliers hung like captured stars, Adeus sat alone most evenings. The house was too big, too cold, too empty, despite being filled with things worth more than most people's lives. She would stand by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching Lagos glitter below her like a city of broken promises, and wonder when her husband had stopped seeing her. Amika was always on his phone, always in meetings, always calculating something she could not see. One Friday evening, she packed a small bag and took the 8-hour drive back to Enugu, to the village where red earth still stained children's feet and women balanced the world on their heads. Her mother, Mama Ngozi, was hanging herbs to dry outside their modest compound when Adaeze's car pulled up, dust rising like spirits behind it. "Mama," Adaeze said, falling into her mother's arms, and for the first time in months, she felt warm. They sat under the old mango tree, the one Adaeze had climbed as a child, and spoke in the language of women who know that silence sometimes screams louder than words. "He's changed, Mama," Adaeze finally whispered. "He doesn't touch me anymore, doesn't talk to me. I feel like a painting on his wall, beautiful to look at, but not real." Mama Ngozi's eyes, deep and knowing like wells that see into tomorrow, studied her daughter's face. Without a word, she went inside and returned with a small leather pouch. From it, she poured cowrie shells onto a woven mat, muttering prayers their ancestors taught her grandmother's grandmother. The shells fell. Mama Ngozi's breath caught. "My daughter," she said slowly, her voice heavy as stone. "Run. That man no longer sees you. He sees only what you're worth." Adaeze laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that holds back tears. "Mama, you and your old ways. Amika loves me. He's just stressed with work." "The cowries do not lie, Adaeze. They show me a grave with fresh earth and a man counting coins beside it. Mama, please, run." But Adaeze did not run. She kissed her mother's forehead, promised to visit again soon, and drove back to Lagos, back to the mansion that gleamed like a mausoleum, back to the husband who had already decided she was worth more dead than alive. The following Tuesday, Amika sat in his lawyer's office on the 40th floor of a building that scraped the sky. His lawyer, Tunde, was his oldest friend, the brother he never had. The only person who knew where all the bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking, of course. 50 million naira, Tunde said, sliding a folder across the mahogany desk. That's what you need in 30 days, or the creditors start seizing assets. The Singapore deal fell through. The government contract got cancelled. Emeka, your empire is bleeding. Emeka's jaw tightened. His empire. Everything he had clawed and fought and lied to build. He thought of his father, the poor mechanic who died with grease under his fingernails and nothing in his bank account. He had sworn to be different, to be powerful, to be untouchable. What about liquidating some properties? Tunde suggested. Not enough, not fast enough. Then what? Emeka stared out the window at Lagos, stretching endlessly below, a city that ate the weak and worshipped the strong. His mind drifted to Adeas, sweet, trusting Adeas, who had just updated her will last month, making him sole beneficiary, who had life insurance worth 75 million naira, who had recently inherited land from her late father, land now valued at 40 million, 115 million naira, more than enough to save everything. His face remained expressionless, but behind his eyes, something dark and final clicked into place. I'll handle it, he said quietly. Tunde frowned. Emeka, what are you? I said, I'll handle it. Over the next 2 weeks, Emeka became the husband Adazi had been praying for. He came home early. He cooked her meals, something he hadn't done since their honeymoon. He made her tea every morning, kissed her forehead, told her she looked beautiful, even in her nightgown. Adao's bloomed under the attention, like a flower that had been denied sunlight. She called her best friend, squealing with joy. He's back. The man I married is back. But what Adaze could not see, what no one could see except God and the devil, watching from opposite corners, was the small brown bottle Emeka kept hidden in his office safe. Clear liquid, tasteless, colorless, just a few drops in her morning tea, a few drops in her evening soup. Not enough to kill quickly, enough to make it look natural. Arsenic is patient. It does not announce itself with drama. It whispers into the body like a rumor, spreading slowly, shutting down organs one by one, making doctors scratch their heads and say words like unexplained and unfortunate. By the end of the first week, Adaouz had headaches. By the second week, nausea. By the third week, she could barely stand without the room spinning. Maybe you should see a doctor, Emeka suggested, his voice dripping with concern so perfect it could win awards. I'm sure it's just stress, Adaouz said, but her hands trembled as she held her teacup. The dinner party was supposed to be their comeback. Emeka had invited investors, partners, socialites, all the people who mattered in Lagos's golden circles. Adaouz wore a gold dress that clung to her thinning frame, her makeup carefully applied to hide the hollows forming under her eyes. She smiled. She laughed. She played the role of the perfect wife. And then, halfway through dessert, her fork clattered to the floor. Adaouz, someone called. She tried to speak, but her tongue felt thick, foreign. The room tilted, faces blurred. And then she was falling. Emeka caught her with practiced precision, his face transforming into a mask of panic, so convincing even he almost believed it. Call an ambulance. Someone call an ambulance. At Lagos General Hospital, doctors ran tests, blood work, scans. Everything came back inconclusive. Her organs are failing, one doctor told Emeka in the hallway. But we can't determine why. Do whatever it takes, Emeka said, gripping the doctor's hand, tears in his eyes. She's my whole world. What the doctors didn't know was that Emeka had already arranged for a transfer. A private doctor. a man whose medical license was as flexible as his morals, a man who had just received 2 million naira to ensure that Adais Okafor would not survive the week. 3 days later, in that private ward, where machines beeped their mechanical prayers, Adais's heart stopped. The doctor on duty, the one Emeka had paid, wrote sudden organ failure on the death certificate without blinking. Emeka wept at her bedside, his sobs echoing down sterile hallways. Nurses whispered about how much he loved her, how devoted he was, how tragic it all was. No one saw him check his phone in the bathroom. No one saw the message he sent. "It's done." No one saw the smile. The funeral was a spectacle. White roses by the thousands, a golden casket so polished you could see heaven reflected in it. A celebrity pastor who spoke about God's mysterious ways and how the good die young. Politicians came. Celebrities came. The governor sent a wreath the size of a car. But in the back of the church, dressed in black wrapper and headscarf, stood Mama Ngozi. Her face was carved from grief and something older, something harder, knowledge that tastes like iron and truth. She did not cry. When it was time to view the body, she approached the casket slowly, her bare feet silent on marble floors. She looked down at her daughter, at a Daisy's face made peaceful by the mortician's art, and she leaned close, whispering in Igbo words the ancestors taught her. "If they have wronged you, my daughter, do not rest, do not forgive. Return, return, and let truth be your vengeance." Thunder cracked outside, though the morning had been clear. At the burial site, as the golden casket was lowered into red earth, storm clouds gathered like angry spirits. Rain began to fall, not the gentle rain of blessing, but the rain of reckoning. An elder in the crowd muttered, "The ancestors are not pleased." Emeka stood under a black umbrella, his face appropriately somber, counting the minutes until he could leave, until he could access the insurance money, until he could sell the land, until he could breathe again. He did not hear his mother-in-law's whispered curse. He did not see her bury a mirror at the grave's edge, a mirror that would reflect all hidden things back to the world. He only saw his empire, saved. Within a week, the insurance company released the funds. 75 million naira appeared in Emeka's account, like magic, like mercy, like murder's reward. Within 2 weeks, he had sold Adazi's inherited land to a developer, pocketing another 40 million. Within a month, his debts were paid. His empire was secure. And he was seen at Eco Hotel's rooftop lounge with a new woman on his arm. Obioma, a social media influencer with 2 million followers, and the kind of beauty that exists only in filtered photographs and expensive lighting. She wore Adazi's jewelry, sat in Adoizi's car, slept in Adoizi's bed. Lagos whispered, but Lagos always whispers, and the rich, as always, do not hear the poor. But Emeka heard other things. Late at night, he heard Adazi's voice calling his name. He smelled her perfume in empty rooms. Her favorite song, a slow high-life melody about faithful love, played on his car radio, even when the radio was off. He would wake up at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, certain he saw her standing at the foot of his bed, dressed in white, her eyes sad and knowing. "Baby, you're scaring me," Obioma said one night, watching him stare at shadows. "You keep looking over your shoulder. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," he snapped, louder than he meant to, but he was not fine. Guilt is a patient hunter. It does not kill quickly. It waits. It watches. It whispers. In Enugu, Mama Ngozi did not mourn the way other mothers mourn. She did not wail. She did not tear her clothes. Instead, she went to see the oldest herbalist in 3 villages, a woman whose age no one could count, whose eyes saw through flesh to the truth beneath. My daughter was murdered, Mama Ngozi said simply. The herbalist nodded. She had known before the words were spoken. The spirits had already told her. Together, they performed a ritual older than Christianity, older than colonialism, older than the concept of nations. They didn't call Adaizi's spirit back. That would be cruel. Instead, they called something else, truth. They awakened it, set it loose in the world like a beast that cannot be caged. Mama Ngozi buried a mirror at Adaizi's grave, its glass facing up toward heaven, reflecting everything down to earth. What is hidden will be revealed, she whispered. What is buried will rise. What was stolen will return. The ancestors listened, and in Lagos, in that glass mansion on Banana Island, Amika's nightmares grew worse. Tunde could not sleep anymore. The lawyer who had helped his best friend prepare insurance documents, update wills, arrange financial structures, he lay awake at night, replaying the timeline. How quickly Adaiz got sick after those documents were signed. How Emeka insisted on a private doctor. How he pushed for immediate cremation until Mama Ngozi threatened legal action. The pieces fit together like bones in a grave. One Tuesday morning, Tunde pulled Adaizi's file. He made calls. He asked questions. He found the private doctor who had signed the death certificate, a man whose hands shook when Tunde said Adaizi's name. I don't know what you're talking about, the doctor stammered. You received 2 million naira from Chukwuemeka Okafor the day after his wife died. The doctor's face went white as bone. Tunde left that office with confirmation of what his soul already knew. His best friend was a murderer, and he, by preparing those documents, had helped him do it. He went straight to Amika's office, bypassing the secretary, slamming the door behind him. What did you do? Tunde's voice was barely above a whisper. Emeka looked up from his computer, his face calm. Too calm. I don't know what you mean. Adaizi, the insurance, the doctor, the money. What did you do? Careful, Tunde. You're talking about my dead wife. I'm talking about murder. Emeka stood slowly, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow across the desk. You want to destroy me? Go ahead. Try. But remember, you co-signed those documents. You set up the accounts. You're just as guilty. We go down together, brother. Tunde felt his world tilt. He stumbled backward, out of the office, into the elevator, into the Lagos heat that suddenly felt like hell's lobby. But before he left the building, he did one thing. He copied every file, every document, every bank transfer, every piece of evidence, and he sent it all anonymously to Ada Nwankwo, the investigative journalist who had brought down 3 governors and a senator, the woman they called the Truth. Obioma was not stupid. Beautiful, yes. Vain, certainly. But not stupid. She noticed how Emeka whispered to himself at night, how he locked his office even when he was home, how he flinched when someone said Adaizi's name. And women who survive by their beauty learn to sense danger the way animals sense earthquakes. One afternoon, while Emeka was at a meeting, Obioma tried his office door. Locked, as always. But she knew where he kept the spare key. Rich men are predictable in their hiding places. Inside the office, everything was pristine. Too pristine. The kind of clean that hides things. She searched methodically. Desk drawers, cabinets, behind books. And then she found it. A locked drawer in the filing cabinet. She used a hairpin, a trick her cousin taught her. The lock clicked. Inside, photos of Adaiz, her death certificate, and a small leather ledger with handwritten entries. Dr. Obi, 2 million, silence. Land sale, 40 million complete. Insurance payout, 75 million received. Obioma's blood turned to ice water. She took photos with her phone, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She put everything back exactly as she found it, locked the drawer, left the office, walked calmly to the bedroom, and then, only then, did she allow herself to collapse on the floor, hyperventilating. That night, she pretended to sleep. Emeka came to bed late, as always. Around 2 a.m., his phone rang. He stepped onto the balcony, closing the door behind him. But Obioma had already crept close enough to hear. "I need the land transfer finalized tomorrow." Emeka's voice carried through the glass. "Once it's done, there's no proof left. Everything gets buried with the property sale." Obioma recorded every word. The next morning, she told Emeka she was visiting her mother. She packed a small bag, kissed his cheek, and left the mansion. But she did not go to her mother. She drove 8 hours to Enugu, to a village she'd never been to find a woman she'd never met. She drove to find Mama Ngozi. The two women sat under the mango tree, and Obioma told everything, showed the photos, played the recording. When she finished, Mama Ngozi sat in silence for a long moment, her eyes closed, her lips moving in silent prayer. "The ancestors sent you," Mama Ngozi finally said. "You were never his love. You were his judgment. What do we do?" Mama Ngozi smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of justice, which is often cruel to be fair. "Now," she said, "we let truth do what truth does best. We let it destroy everything built on lies." The headline appeared on a Thursday morning, the kind that makes the whole country stop. "Did billionaire Chukwuemeka Okafor murder his wife?" Ada Nwankwo's article was surgical. Bank records showing the payment to the doctor, phone logs, witness testimony from hospital staff who remembered the rushed private transfer, timeline analysis, insurance documents, land sale records. It was all there. Within hours, social media exploded. Within days, Emeka's business partners released statements distancing themselves. Contracts were canceled, sponsorships pulled. The governor who had attended the funeral demanded an investigation. Emeka's mansion became a prison surrounded by journalists and cameras. He tried to board a flight to Dubai. At the airport, police arrested him, cameras flashing like lightning, his face, once so confident, now twisted in something between rage and fear. Evidence. Just rumors and coincidence. But then a detective placed a folder on the table. Mama Ngozi requested an independent autopsy before burial. "We've been holding the results, waiting for the right time. Would you like to know what they found?" Emeka's throat went dry. Arsenic, enough in her system to kill a horse, but administered slowly over weeks. Very clever. Except for one thing, you forgot that a mother's love sees what others miss. The trial became the biggest spectacle Lagos had seen in years. Every seat filled, cameras everywhere. The nation held its breath. Obioma testified first, playing the recorded phone call, her voice strong despite the death threats, flooding her social media. Tunda testified next, presenting every document, his voice breaking as he admitted his role, accepting whatever punishment came. The bribed doctor offered immunity, confessed everything, how Emeka approached him, the exact amount paid, the false death certificate, every detail. Emeka's lawyers fought hard, but you cannot defend against truth once it decides to speak. The judge, an elderly woman with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much injustice, read the verdict with a voice that did not waver. Guilty. Life imprisonment, without possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted. Some cheered, some cried, some simply nodded, as if they had always known. As police led Emeka away in chains, he looked up at the gallery one last time. And there, in the back row, he saw her, Dies. She stood in white, her face serene, her eyes not angry, not sad, just knowing. She smiled, not with cruelty, but with the peace of someone who no longer has to carry the weight of being alive. Emeka gasped. Dies. No one else saw her, and when he blinked, she was gone. Outside the courthouse, rain fell gently, washing the streets clean. Mama Ngozi stood with her face turned to the sky, her arms raised, her voice singing an old song about justice and ancestors and the way truth always eventually finds its way home. Reporters surrounded her. How do you feel? They asked. Are you satisfied with the verdict? She looked directly into the cameras, her voice steady. My daughter did not need me to bring her justice. The ancestors did that. I simply reminded them that we were waiting. In the years that followed, Mama Ngozi returned to her village, where children still played under mango trees and women still balanced the world on their heads. She kept Adaizi's grave covered in fresh flowers, and on certain nights, when the moon was full and the air was thick with memory, she would sit beside it and talk to her daughter the way mothers do. About nothing, about everything, about love and betrayal, and the strange way life teaches lessons even after death. Obioma disappeared from social media. She moved to a small town, opened a school for girls, and never spoke publicly about Emeka again. Tunde served 2 years for his role in the financial structures, then dedicated his life to legal aid, helping poor families fight injustice, trying every day to balance the scales he once helped tip. And Emeka, he sits in a cell in Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison, where the walls are gray and the air tastes of regret. They say he talks to himself sometimes, apologizing to someone no one else can see. They say he barely sleeps. They say he's aged 20 years and 5. They say a lot of things. But here is what matters. Adius did not return as a ghost. She returned as truth itself, carried by a mother's love, a lawyer's conscience, and a woman who chose courage over complicity. She returned in courtroom testimonies and buried evidence, and the way lies eventually eat themselves from the inside out. Because here is what Emeka never understood. You can't build an empire on a grave. You cannot plant seeds in blood and expect anything but thorns. You cannot murder love and expect to live peacefully with its ghost. The innocent may fall, but they never fall forever. And the wicked may rise, but they stand on sand. In the end, it is not wealth that buries us. It is the truth we try to hide. Somewhere in Enugu, under a mango tree, a young girl asks Mama Ngozi, why do good people suffer? And Mama Ngozi, whose eyes have seen too much and whose heart has survived more than anyone should have to, smiles gently and says, they suffer, my child, so that their goodness can be proven. And when truth finally speaks, even the grave cannot silence it. The girl nods, not quite understanding, but sensing the weight of wisdom in those words. And in the distance, thunder rolls, not threatening, but promising that justice, though slow, though painful, though sometimes delivered by the most unlikely hands, will always, always find its way home. A lie may take care of the present, but it has no future. And truth? Truth is eternal. Remember this.